Nobody can ever accuse me of not doing the right thing. When the Mets didn't steal, when the Mets took Soto from the Yankees, I took it like a big boy. I didn't complain. I said, you guys won. You did the whole spiel with Cohen, with me. I laid out.
Yeah.
And then the Yankees made the playoffs and the Mets didn't. So, life is usual.
So the point is you can't win in the offseason. You can win the offseason. You can't win in the offseason, though. And that leads us to where I do want to start today with the winter meetings starting up last night. And there was an article from The Athletic. I'm curious to get your take here. I know you read it from Will Salmon.
Yep.
Where he's talking about the Mets lacking, or maybe not lacking the ability. Obviously, they have the ability to do whatever they want. But the Mets don't want to give long-term deals out to starting pitchers, which I thought was perfect off of what we discussed last week. Remember we were talking about, well, if the Mets are going to be in on Valdez or Suarez or whatever of these guys, why wouldn't they just get Max Fried last year? So at least it makes some sense in line with their thinking that if David Stearns does not believe in paying free agent pitchers big money, you know what? I'm okay with it. On first read, I'm like, well, what the hell is this? You got to upgrade the rotation. How are you going to do that without signing at least one of these guys to a big contract? And my expectation was they were going to sign at least one of these guys to a big contract. Now, after thinking about it, I'd rather Stearns do what he does. They will get pitching. But the idea of going out there and giving Valdez 8 years, or the way that Cease got his ridiculous contract, I'm not doing that if I'm the Mets. So I like this early report from Will Salmon.
You like it, huh? Okay. I understand it because I don't think there's anybody quite like Max Fried that's available right now in terms of that 6, 7, 8 year trade or 6, 7, 8 year contract. Now there's other stuff on the trade market which could be very interesting here. See, I look at the Mets from last year, and last year's team is going to be very different from this year's. Nimmo's already gone, so you start there, right? The rotation was awful. The bullpen was weak, and the lineup was too top-heavy. So that's really code for saying the Mets really weren't that good. You had Pete who crushed it. Soto put up good numbers. Lindor was a bit sporadic, but that's why I say top-heavy. Once you got, and obviously Nimmo had some power, but once you get past the top 3 or top 4 of the Mets had more problems than they had answers. So because I think we all believe and certainly live through it and know that that's true, I'm not going to shoot down any sort of mindset from Stearns. I'm not going to just say, well, that's ridiculous, because I don't think there's an A-plus pitcher out there on the trade front. But this would scare me in this regard. Every Met fan, or at least most of them, were saying, hey, this guy better deviate from this, bargain bin shopping discount rack that he did the last 2 years. First year worked, second year it did not. So as long as he's not doing that, then I'm okay with it. But if he thinks he's going to try to recreate what he tried to do the first couple of years, the Mets Met fans will, I think Met fans will go nuts, and the Mets will not be a playoff team.
Well, do you think about it this way? Do you think Valdez is worth a 7, 8 year deal?
I don't, Sal. Okay. I honestly don't, but I think that I don't. Right. No. But there's certain situations, I think, like the Mets situation, where you got to pony up the extra year or two because you guys were so bad at the rotation.
But that doesn't mean that it would be the right thing. I understand that thought process, and I was there for a little part of this, really just not giving it much. We're following along with some of the reports and knowing what the Mets need, and then thinking, okay, well, how are they going to upgrade this rotation? They need multiple arms. They need high-end, top-of-the-rotation arms. The biggest one for me, and it's always been the same thing, is Skubal. He's the best guy. He's the best investment. I'm not opposed to paying him. Now, if they had an issue paying him, then we'd have a problem. But overpaying for Valdez or even Ranger Suarez, depending on what kind of contracts these guys demand, but based on what Dylan Cease got, I would think, oh, crap, they're going to have to overpay. I would not want to be in that market if I'm the Mets. I would want to invest in the known guaranteed commodities like Tarik Skubal. The other way to do it would be to trade for some of these guys, whether it's Peralta. Now, some of the names that Will Salmon wrote about, Mitch Keller, good God. Mackenzie Gore, what are we doing here? So that's where I draw a line. I don't need you to go out there and overpay for, let's say, a Valdez, but I also don't need you to settle on, Mackenzie Gore or Mitch Keller. I'd rather get Peralta, Skubal. The Mets need an ace. Where's that coming? Is Valdez a true ace?
No.
Okay.
No,
so then why would you pay him ace-like money? In that scenario, I'd rather pay a lesser commitment to Michael King, who has the potential to be a higher-end guy, a guy that keeps coming up. So I think The Mets need to stick to what they believe in and be smart about this, and not just because they made a big mistake last year and it failed, go chasing this offseason and just go get whatever pitchers that's out there, give them the biggest contract because you need a guy.
Well, listen, one of the things that I've said about last year, and obviously the short scouting report, and I gave it at the start of the show, the rotation was awful, the bullpen was spotty, the lineup was top-heavy, but the rotation wouldn't, and even with the 83 wins and just missing out on the playoffs here, I think, and I've said this before, if you had McClain for a full season, I think it's a little different. Now, I'm also saying that with Garrett Cole, if you had Garrett Cole for a full season last year, or if you had Schlittler but it doesn't always work out like that ideally. We could sit here in this isolated winter meetings, off-season baseball bubble and say, well, you give Cole 20 starts, you give Schlittler more, you give McClain more, Yankees win the division, they don't finish with a tie with Toronto, Mets are on a non-playoff team. It sounds good, doesn't always work. I think the key here for the Mets is they've got to hold on to their top prospects, which, and I trust Stearns to do this, but why they've got to buy some, whether it's a Valdez, whomever it is, and swallow hard and give them the extra year and the extra $30 million or the extra 2 years maybe, because I think by buying, even though it's not an ace, really a number two, by buying somebody now that enables you to keep that treasure chest of and I don't mean
the
McClain.
Prospects. Yeah, I know.
I mean McClain maybe down the road for Skubal, but certainly Sproat and Tong for Skubal now, and maybe Skeens down the road with McClain.
See, I told you last offseason that I would not be a big proponent of just spending big on free agent pitchers, even though it's an area of need. I just don't agree with that thought process anymore with the way the game has evolved.
Yeah, you've said that for a while.
But there was one guy who I would have invested in, and that guy was Max Fried.
Yep.
So if the Mets were along the lines of thinking, well, we need pitching and we like Max Fried, the Yankees made a smart investment. Yankees just weren't throwing money recklessly, although they did it with Rodon, which I disagree with. But Garrett Cole was a smart investment. It wasn't, well, we need pitching, let's just go get. No, Garrett Cole was a, no doubt about it, bona fide, legitimate ace that they invested in.
Yep.
And you could say the same thing, maybe not to the extent of Garrett Cole, but Max Fried last year, to me, while others are going after Corbin Burns or some of the other names out, Fried was the guy to invest in. So it was a sound, smart investment, even if they had to extend the extra year. Now, if Tarik Skubal were on the market, it'd be a different story. I wouldn't be saying, well, Steve Cohen and Stearns, they shouldn't go to the extent. I'd be saying, I don't care what it takes. That's the guy you got to invest in, just like they did with Yamamoto, just like they did with Soto. These guys, Valdez, Suarez, these guys aren't that. So I understand when you see that headline, you see it on social media, or you read the article from Will Salmon of The Athletic, the initial instinct is, what the hell is this? The Mets need pitching, they better spend. But if you actually think about it and think it through, you don't just want to throw money at a problem just because there's answers there, if they're not guys that you truly believe can be difference makers.
Listen, the bottom line is this, unless it's pretty much a Soto, the back end of the contract's going to be ridiculous, but he's young enough where you can justify that, right? A-Rod with Texas. Most of these free agent, whether it's position or pitcher, free agent contracts are, you're paying, whether it's, 15, 20, 25% of something somebody's already done. So I don't really think, even to an extent, Max Fried, as good as Fried was a year ago, sub-3 ERA, 19 wins, a whip barely over 1. He had a little bumpy stretch, 4 or 5 weeks, but he was an absolute horse up until that point, and then he picked it back up and he finished strong. I don't think any free agent contract is really... It's going to be great value, but I do think that there's value in becoming a playoff team. And let me ask you this.
Right.
Now, if you have Valdez on the team last year, do you think you make the playoffs? I do. I do.
I still think they had more issues. I understand what you're saying. Look, would Valdez make the Mets better? Yes, of course he'd make them better, but would he make them better by chewing up all that contract that they'd be giving? Is he a definitive ace that's worth spending the $200 million? For me, probably not. I'd rather have Peralta if we're going just pound for pound pitchers. Now, is he going to be available for Milwaukee? Who knows? But I'd rather have Peralta. I'd even rather take a chance on Alcantara more and give up the prospects as opposed to committing to a pitcher who I don't think is a legitimate, no doubt about it, ace that I know I'm going to have to overpay for because that's what the market says.
That's what I hate. Like, Alcantara, I'm interested in him for both teams, but, with the Mets here, but you're giving up stuff. What are you giving up? Obviously, McClain, you're not giving up. You giving up a Todd, you giving up a Sproat, you giving up a Jet Williams.
Everybody else I'd give up.
Well, then you can't do that because now when Skubal's dangled.
Well, no. I don't mean for him specifically. I'm saying in general, yes, for Skubal.
But that's okay, fair enough. But that's what to get somebody like Alcantara or some other trades, you're going to part with some players that the Tigers might want. That's why I would rather buy some people. Hey, if you can't buy a top of a rotation, then...
But where are the guys? That's what I'm saying.
Like,
you're right.
Steve Cohen really... Then does that really... resonate the way that we thought it will? Because to me, buying players is a way to not only get better, but also preserve the prospects to get Skubal or Skeens.
Agreed, but you're not buying the top of the rotation because there isn't a legitimate ace there.
I know, but you got to start somewhere. I mean, 2 innings, 2 1/3, 3 1/3. Hey, last year, 4 innings was like Tom Seaver, Dwight Gooden in 85. Every night was just wow. Now I know that those were the worst circumstances with injuries. I don't think it'll be like that no matter what.
Use King as an example.
Yep.
King versus Valdez. Okay, Valdez obviously the more proven commodity. King had some issues staying healthy.
I like King more than you. You don't have to sell me on King. I like him.
You're right, but just say Valdez and what he's going to command versus King and what he's going to command. Which one do you think would be a more sound? Now, someone going to say, well, you're going with the bargain basement with Michael King.
No, that's not a bargain basement. No way. That's not a bargain. He's good. He's got good stuff.
In comparison to Valdez, who's been the more proven, known commodity, there's a reason Dylan Cease got what he got, and Valdez is going to probably get what he's going to get. And there's a reason Michael King is not going to be in that caliber of demand.
Yep.
I would rather have King, say, for 3 years than Valdez for 7 or 8.
I agree with that. I actually agree with that.
Or, by the way, the other thing Will talked about this in the article is if those guys want to take a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal for more money, then the Mets would be involved in that the way that they were with Scherzer and Verlander a couple years ago.
That's true. And listen, the other thing, too, and we'll get these calls. I know you guys want to jump in. 888-808-111. I'll get to the football later, obviously, but, more around the league. Then not a lot to say about the Jets yesterday. Oh, Jesus. The field looked good. The field looked really good. I also think that how this works out is largely dependent upon, do you lose Pete Alonso? Do you bring back Edwin Diaz to try to have a lockdown bullpen? Like, think about this, Al. If Pete bolts, and you know that I think there's a good chance he's going to Boston. I've thought that I think he's gone more than he's not. So I've been on the record with that. Hopefully I'm wrong for the Mets' point of view, whatever. If Diaz gets some reckless offer from Toronto and the Mets are like, nah, not doing it, well, now you got to find an 8th inning guy and a 7th inning guy. Oh, you might have a 7th inning guy, but you got to find the back end of the bullpen, and you lose a thumper who's going to give you 35 to 40 bombs. So if that's the case, I don't think the Mets could then have an offseason where they don't buy a big free agent pitcher, even though he's not going to be an A-plus true one, more in the B, more in the number 2 variety. But they've got, hey, listen, if you lose Pete the Hammer, you better get some pitching.
BT and Sal on the field. Let's get some calls in. Our friends at Town Fair Tire remind you that at Town Fair Tire, you always get the guaranteed lowest price on name brand tires from Connecticut to Maine. Nobody beats Town Fair Tire. Nobody. Mark is calling from Oceanside. What's up, Mark?
Good morning, guys. How are you today?
Good.
What's happening, buddy?
Okay, I'm lead off today. I have no confidence that Stearns will pull this off successfully. In fact, I think the Yankees will have a better off-season. You talk about rotation. Last year, his rotation was Frankie Montas, Griffin Canning, and Paul Blackburn were his centerpiece signings. How can you trust this man to do the right thing with starting pitching? He doesn't seem to like starting pitching and believes you can just throw anybody out there.
Well, Mark, hold on one sec. Now, listen, that's why this is the interesting year of evaluation, I think, for many of us. Year 1, he did some bargain hunting. It worked out. Mets were a really good team. They had a great run, good story. Year 2, the exact opposite. Didn't work out. I think he's going to adjust, but until he actually does, we've got to see it. But last year at this time, the Mets were not connected to big-time free agent pitchers. This year they are. I think it's shifting. I think Stearns knows he's got to change his approach. And if he doesn't, shame on him, but I think he will.
Yeah, but that's what the article is saying, that they're not going to change that approach, which is why I don't. And I don't think
they're getting something. They're getting something more than they got last year. That's for sure.
I don't think he should change his approach. They obviously his approach, Mark. What Stearns has done and his beliefs are that you have to draft and develop the young pitching. That's how you have sustained success. He did it in Milwaukee. He's been here for 2 years. That takes years to do. So while you're gonna supplement that with spending on the right guys in free agency or trading for the right guys, he hasn't had time to implement how he builds a rotation within an organization.
Sal, I know this. I love this run prevention, but you got to score runs too. If he runs Alonso out of town and runs Diaz out of town, which is very possible, he'll do that.
But what if those guys won?
Sal, being. You have to look at it this way. What does Joe Burrow want? He's a great quarterback. You you.
Well, he went to a Super Bowl.
One guy does not win it for you.
Well, a quarterback can. Mark, it's a bad analogy, and thank you for the call. Here's the thing. You have to let go of the emotions of Diaz and Alonso and, I love these guys. I'm not saying I don't want them back, because I do want them back. I don't believe there's a better option to produce power than Pete Alonso, which is why I want him back, especially if he will play first, especially if he will DH a little bit. Clearly, there's no better closer available than Edwin Diaz. However, the idea that you can't build a team without those guys is asinine. With those guys, the Mets haven't won squad.
Yeah, I know. That is different kind of from what we started talking about, but I love Mark. I think Mark generally makes a lot of good points. I'm not with him, with all due respect, Mark. I'm not feeling you here. Listen, if somebody's going to give Diaz 5 years for 100, have fun. Take the 5 years, get the 100, and get lost. I mean, if somebody's going to get, and I don't think anybody's going to get Pete 6, but if the Red Sox go 5+1, good luck, Pete. You've been a terrific Met. Have fun denting the Green Monster up there in Fenway. Like, to think that the Mets can't function without a first baseman who's been obviously very good with power, but deficient in some other areas, and a closer who, when he's on, is elite, but I think has been a little overstated with the injuries. First year was awful. I mean, people make it seem like, Diaz's been here 5 years. He's put up 5 years like Mariano Rivera.
Right.
He's put up 2 stink jobs, and 1 year he missed. And the greater point is that even with and again, they are really good players. I'm not trying to denigrate them. I'm just trying to contextualize what they've done so far. And I am a believer that if you lost consistently, not 1 year, not an outlier, if you lost consistently with a single core, it's probably time to mix it up. And by the way, nobody's talked about mixing up this core more than BT and Sal. And the fact that and you started it even before me. So the fact that Stearns already traded Nimmo, it seems like the Mets are lukewarm again on Pete with a long-term extension, tells you that that's what they're thinking, and that's what they should be thinking.